Hello and welcome. Now, I know some of you have got your practical exam in IT in a couple of days' time, the date of recording this video, and thought it might be useful to you to go through a few things that the examiner had to say about the June 2019 paper 2. So just to start off with some general comments. This was the first series that this exam had run. It was a 2017 onwards qualification, so that means 2 years from 2017 to 2019, that was the first exams. 4,700 students entered for the exam. I'm assuming it's going to be a little more this year. And students who did not submit all tasks generally failed to submit work for Activity 3, web authoring, and or Activity 4, presentation software. So I can understand why web authoring might have been difficult. You might not have had the right software. You may have been using Publisher. As some people have mentioned in the comments, that the exam centre they're going to has only got Publisher. But to not do the presentation software activity was losing, in my mind, what is relatively easy marks. So let's jump in and have a look at some of the other things they had to say. So the first comment here, students lost marks because of a lack of attention to detail. For example, 14 marks were available for entering correct formula into a spreadsheet. Some students failed to gain marks for this because they did not submit a formula view of the spreadsheet. Right, let's just quickly show you how to do that. Okay, so how do I show my formulas? Here are my formulas. So go to Formulas, click on Formulas there on the Formulas tab, and show formulas like that. And you might want to spend some time just to double click there just to make sure you can see the full formula there. And then you'll need to spend some time just maybe narrowing down the columns. So there's no excuse not to be able to do that. That is how you show formulas. That is how you show formulas ready for printing out to show to the examiner. Screenshots. Where screenshot evidence was required, many students lost marks because their screenshots were cropped or resized so that vital information was not visible or readable. Let's have a look at that now. So we know how to take a screenshot. We press print screen. Okay, I'm going to open Word. New blank document. And what I'm going to do is change the layout to landscape, whichever you've been told to do, and simply Control V, paste. Now, what you need to do is go to picture format and crop it, and maybe crop out some of the stuff that you don't need just to focus on the bits that you do. But just be careful that you don't end up cropping too much, and I wouldn't resize it too much that you can't see all the detail. So it's print screen, you use a crop tool there. Make sure that it's obvious what you're evidencing there, and if needs be, you should be putting some details underneath about what that screenshot represents there. It should be noted that the nature of the examination requires students to enter their details before printing to avoid suspicions of collusions by students. So, as I've said all along, please, in the footer, down here, double click at the bottom. There we go. Okay, we enter our details, and they are name, candidate number, centre number. Okay, even if it's just your name on it and candidate number, that is better than nothing. You must put your details on the footer. You must put your name on your work before it comes out of the printer. Now, I don't think that a lot of centres will remind you to do that, or they'll just accept your work in regardless of whether it's got your name on it or not. So it's up to you. It's your responsibility to remember how to do that. Data files. Data files are given to the centre and should be given to you, so there shouldn't be any problem with that. Labelling and printing. Again, make sure that your examiner is collecting work properly and collating it properly. Things need to be signed there. And if we just look at that, you need to make sure you've got a good printer. So the printer is really good when you're printing out your work. If not, then ask for something else. Ask for it to be reprinted. Because if it's not clear, if it's not readable, you're not going to gain the marks from it, no matter how hard you worked. Remember to collate work. You should hole punch it. Let's just highlight this point. Top left-hand corner of each printout, 1 centimetre from the top left-hand corner of each printout. And attach the printout to the cover sheet so that when the cover sheet is opened by the examiner, the student's work is face up on the left, with the marking grid on the right. Now, just make sure you hole punch it and you tag it all the way through, and you need to hand it in as neatly as possible. And that's pretty much it for general comments. So now we'll move into specific comments. Okay, activity 1, graphic software. Students were asked to remove a background from an image and insert some logo, insert some text onto the image. Now I'm linking above to that video where I covered this, and you can do this in either Photoshop or in PowerPoint. Many students remembered how to remove the background but couldn't achieve all the full marks because they couldn't quite complete it, or some part of it went wrong where they couldn't quite complete the question. And then moving on to the second part of the question, the written part, the written response, a lot of students couldn't understand that the difference between a bitmap image and a vector image is a bitmap image is made of bits, and when you enlarge those bits, the image pixelates, whereas with a vector image, when you enlarge the image, it looks exactly the same as it did when it was smaller. That's because you're enlarging numbers and coordinates, not bits. So the reason that a logo isn't suitable as a bitmap is because logos are likely to be enlarged to appear on posters and different things. And when you enlarge that logo, it's not going to look very good. It's going to look pixelated. You're going to see the staircasing effect. So you would choose a vector image instead. Now it's worth noting this last point here. Just going to highlight that. Students should be reminded that when there is a 2-mark question, there are awarded 1 mark for the identification and 1 mark for the expansion. So we need to see that word because. Okay. So 2nd mark for the expansion. Activity 2, database software. So I'm linking to the video where I covered this. A lot of students were able to do this. Many students create the form. These still do not always match the house style with the logo at the top left. Please read what the house style is before you go in and answer the question. The house style is at the front of the document. You need to make sure you understand that, because you will lose marks if you don't follow that. And a lot of students didn't put the logo in the top left hand corner and make the headings in bold and italics, and they lost marks for that. Most students entered correctly the data for A to B. Most students completed the sort activity correctly, awarded for mark A to C. The query section. This needed a wildcard. Now, I'm linking to a video where I've covered the wildcard, but basically what you needed to write was like blue water, and then you can cover blue water 1 and blue water 2. So please make sure you understand what a wildcard is and how to use that. Now, some problems there with A to E. Logo not on the report, so not following house style, and a few things that aren't basically answering the question. Students included a report where there were too many records and some were in descending order of client ID. So you need to make sure that you do the query first and then you do the report of the query, not the report of the database. And you should narrow down your search results in the query, and then the report should be created of the query. You should not create a report of the data and try and narrow it down in the report. It's not going to work. So query first, then report. Now, most students achieved a mark for stating what a primary key was, what was meant by a foreign key, and what the relationship between the two tables was. However, few students showed an understanding of the advantage of using relational database rather than a single table. Now, advantages of a relational database over a flat file, single table, is that you avoid data duplication. So you only need to enter records once. Please see the video where I've covered this. I'm going to link to that. Also, advantages are you avoid data redundancy, and it just makes the database tidier because you're not duplicating records all the time. So there were 8 people visiting a holiday destination. In a flat file database, you would need 8 records. In a relational database, you would only need 1. And they could link to the holiday destination, and all the people could link to the holiday destination, so you would only see 1 record, and underneath that, linked to that, would be all the 8 people who'd visited that destination. Web authoring software. Activity 3, web authoring software. Now, I've covered this question before, and I'm linking to it above. Students were asked to create 2 linked pages following a given design. It was like a wireframe design, and save them as .html files. Now, if you use something like Expressions or Composer, it will automatically save them as .html files. If you use something else like Publisher, you need to save it as .html files. Now, some people have said to me, can I do videos about Publisher, about using Publisher to create web pages? It's relatively simple. All you need to do is create the page and then save it as a .html file. The problem with using Publishers, as we go through this question, is you cannot access the HTML. You cannot see exactly what you want with the HTML because it kind of pads out the HTML, it fluffs out the HTML, so you can't exactly see what you want and get the exact HTML that you need to answer the question. So if you can, I'll try and avoid using Publisher. You should be using software like Composer, Expressions, and possibly Dreamweaver to create a web page. And you need to see the HTML, and the HTML needs to be copied. So H1, image link, text set to P for paragraph, and an email link. Without the code, the marks could not be awarded. So when you're asked for the HTML code for the web page, you need to show the HTML code for the web page. Students will be asked to annotate the code. Okay? So you print off, in the future, you'll print off the code for the web page and annotate it to show what is happening in that code. Other marks for the web pages were for the content, including text and image. All students included images, but not all were appropriate and not all were square. I've gone through in my videos how to make the image square. You need to set the pixels to 250 by 250. It's really important. This is all losing you marks, so if you don't do that one thing, you're going to lose more marks. Few students referred to the design given in the paper and were not awarded the mark of the home page being consistent with the design structure. If you're given a design for your web page, follow that design. It's as simple as that. Follow the design. It's really, really important that you follow the design. If you're given a design, you follow it, and you don't go off and do your own thing or kind of interpret it. It has to look like the design they've given you. If it says text at the top, the text has to be at the top. Images on the left-hand side, that's where they need to be. And if it says the images need to be 250 by 250 pixels, then you make the images 250 by 250 pixels. Most students included a table, but some students use tab. You know how to insert a table, so make sure you do that. And you insert a table, you don't use a tab key to space out the data. You insert a table, and it looks like a table. Remember in my videos, it takes some time to do that, but take the time to do that because you're going to lose marks if you don't. Where you can't include HTML code, say you're using Publisher, you're going to lose marks. It's as simple as that. My suggestion is if you are doing your Examiner Center where it's just Publisher to create a web page, then you just make a really good web page and just accept the fact that you may lose 2 or 3 marks. Perhaps you need to write down, what I would do is write down in my document that I'm printing off, I'd write down the HTML code that I would use. Just to show the examiner that I do know the HTML, and just put a note to say that I'm using Publisher and it's not possible for me to see the HTML code. Unless, of course, you can view the HTML code and you can screenshot it. But I wouldn't give up hope. I'll just write down the HTML code myself and just explain to the examiner the situation and just concentrate on other questions and concentrate on making a really good web page question. Right, the improvements to the web page. Okay, improvements could be as simple as a link to social media. If you're not sure what to write about improvements to your web page, social media is always a good one because social media allows you to add updates. So you can have the latest photos, the latest kind of blog, the latest videos of what's going on. Social media is always a good thing when you're struggling to think of something you could do to improve the web page, the website. A link to a social media account with updates or Instagram, things like that, Facebook, whatever it is always a really good idea. And Why? The because for the 2 marks, because you can get instant updates, you can get feedback from other people, from people who've used the service, updates of the latest photos, latest images, and the latest kind of blogs or whatever that is. So that completes web pages, and we'll now move on to activity 4, spreadsheet software. So for this activity, students were provided with a spreadsheet that included 2 worksheets. And students were required to use the formula functions. It was intended that they use both worksheets with reference rather than copying content from worksheet 1 and included it into worksheet 2. Now, a link to a video where I've covered this many times, a lot of work on spreadsheets. You've got 2 worksheets, so in your exam question, you're going to have 2 worksheets. What you don't want to do is copy one worksheet onto another. The idea is that you use both worksheets in your answers. Most students achieve marks with inclusion of a heading and formatting of the merged cells. Now, so quite good at formatting. Latter required the use of COUNTIF, or there were a limited number of students who understood the use of this function. Again, link to the video where I've covered the COUNTIF. Make sure you understand how to use it. What it does is it counts if the cell meets a certain condition. So use your number, count if number equals 5, for example, and it'll count all the cells where there is a 5 as a number. The use of VLOOKUP was well done, good to hear, and most students use the link between the worksheets to reference the table and also or incorrectly identified B3 as the correct lookup value. So it's good to see that students can do the VLOOKUP. Now, B1, B2, most students understood how to use data from one worksheet to include another. Where this was done, it was done well. Of the 4 formulae, the one that caused the most issues was the cost of the course with discounts, where students would not always consider the cost with the discount subtracted from it. So you need to read the question carefully. If it says that you need to subtract the discount, you need to subtract the discount. Most students achieved a mark for the replication of the formula or functions. The if statement was done well. Where marks were lost, they tended to be for including some data in the cell rather than the blank cell. Now again, I've covered this question, I showed you how to do that. So if you've got a blank cell, what I suggest you do is put a space in the blank cell so it counts it as well. So it recognizes that it's a blank cell. So what it's supposed to do is count all the data in the cells and ignore the blank cells. So I'll put a space in the blank cell so that it only counts where you offer a free kit bag. Again, link to the video above. Formatting of the spreadsheet to be shown in data view is usually done well. All the headings have been wrapped to use the space efficiently. Most students included a printout to show the filter results of the kit bag. Good. Few students achieved full marks for the chart, as values were not the correct ones, usually include too many references. However, most students, if they did complete the task, received the marks for title and X and Y labels. A3B. This is the hiding the columns, so you need to make sure you hide the columns rather than delete it. If you delete it, you're in big trouble because unless you've got a backup of this, it's gone for good. So it's really simple in Excel to hide columns. All you do is you highlight them, you right click and you go to hide. And then right click again and unhide, or make sure you highlight the correct ones there. Right click there, unhide, and they will come back again. There. So what you need to make sure you do is you highlight that, you click there, exactly there, in the middle. It's a bit awkward with this, like that. So that's highlighted, and then unhide, and the column should appear again. Okay, so I want these columns to come back, simply unhide, and I should be able to get D there, or just simply drag it up like that, and then I get the columns that I hid come back again. So the theory part here, the final part, these questions are usually worth sort of between 2 to 4 marks, maybe even more, maybe up to 6 marks, so it's worth to get them right. The theory part of the spreadsheets was not done well, and most students choose not to attempt the task. Other students were attempting the question did not understand the terms used. As this is a practical unit, more students need to learn the theory behind the practical elements. So let's go and have a look at that question, look at the problem behind it. So here's the question, the offending question. In the details worksheet, cells A2 to C7 are named range courses. Explain one advantage of using named ranges in the spreadsheet. What named ranges are? So just show you this here. If I go to details, if I highlight there, I can type up here and I can call it courses, like that. So when I highlight these cells here, type in courses. Okay, so what we can see now is I highlight those cell range and I can see it's called courses there. Now, why is that useful? Well, if I'm doing a VLOOKUP here, I can do that. Okay, instead of having to use absolute cell references, I can just simply highlight courses like that. Okay, just make sure it does say courses there. Column 2, and then always false. Close brackets. So now, you can see it looks slightly different. Now, the advantage of this is I don't need absolute cell referencing, so I can just simply copy that down and the value is still correct. Okay, so if I copy that formula down, I do not need to use absolute cell referencing, whereas if we just go back, we can see that absolute cell referencing had to be used there, otherwise it would have lost the table. It would have lost that table there. So the advantage there, if we go back to that question of using named ranges, allows us to avoid using absolute cell referencing. Question 2, explain one advantage of using lookup tables in the spreadsheet. Now, lookup tables are here, so this is a lookup table, and I used a VLOOKUP for that. The advantage of that, of course, is that if I just come out of formula view there, now, my formula depends on this cost here. So, if the cost changes, so a lot of cells are using, for example, D, which is 500. So the cost of D is 500. Now, say I decided to offer a discount on that. I changed that down to 450 to offer a bit of discount to increase sales. Then you can see that that changes there, and every other cell changes there as well. So to answer that question, advantage of using lookup tables in a spreadsheet is I only need to change the data once in one place, and then the whole of the rest of the spreadsheet will change as well. Now that completes the spreadsheet question, and that was the last part of the theory. That is 4 marks. So now we'll scroll down and we'll move on to the next one, which is presentation software. Now, the exam's 3 hours long, and that sounds like a long time. But if you're struggling with some of the questions, you're struggling to get formula work for the last question, you're going to waste time, and you're going to end up possibly getting down to half an hour left, and you've still got a presentation software activity 5 to do. So what this paper is saying, there's a lot of students couldn't do the presentation, and they lost themselves 10 marks because they couldn't do the presentation software question. Now, if you're watching this video, you're probably revising, and you would have watched a lot of my videos on doing these questions and having some practice of that, and downloading the past papers that I've linked to and practicing them yourself. Students should use the SAMs, sample assessment materials, to practice completing a paper and allow sufficient time to complete all tasks. So it's really important that you have that time. You practice before you go into the exam of doing things within the 3 hour time frame. That doesn't mean doing things quickly and rushing things, but it does mean working at a pace that you can sustain, and you haven't given yourself just sort of 15-20 minutes to do the last activity where it's going to go wrong and you're going to lose a whole chunk of marks. Now, just some things about this. If we have a look through this, the presentation task was generally done well, I think, from what I've read here. One thing to consider, though, is your use of speaker notes. So if we go to PowerPoint, I'm just going to show you what I mean. So here's a presentation that I've got. Okay. What it's saying is there shouldn't be lots of text. There should be just bullet points. So bullet points here. And the rule is, which I'll write down for you, 5 plus or minus 2. So that means between 3 and 7 bullet points. Now, if I pull this up here, where should I add all the text that I'm given? It should be down here in the notes page. So you just put bullet points there. You are not required in your exam, you are not required to copy and paste large chunks of text onto the PowerPoint slide, even though you're given it. What you are required to do is remember to use bullet points. Bullet points are good for a presentation because the presentation should be about you giving the presentation, not people trying to read the slides in front of them where there's too much writing on there. It should be about you giving the presentation. It should be bullet points on the slide. So, images and text should enhance the presentation. Let's look at the theory section of that question. So we'll just scroll down there. So, fairly straightforward question, and it's a shame that some students couldn't answer all the questions there. Let's look at these theory questions. Explain one benefit to someone of using a slide master for his presentation. Well, it makes all the slides consistent, it makes them all look the same, it makes it look professional, you can add logos on there, you can place exactly where you want everything. State one reason why it's important to change the default file names when saving files. Right, nothing really completely to do with PowerPoint, it's every file name that you've got. So instead of calling it doc1.doc or file.doc, we call it a sensible file name, which usually is what the document is about. And why do we do that? Because when we come back in 6 months' time, when we come back later to look at the file, we know exactly what it is from the file name. It's a sensible file name, so we know what the file is. And that completes the PowerPoint section. And total for task B4 was 19 marks. So we'll wrap up with the general comments, and I'll copy these general comments into the description of the video. Most students presented their work well and in the correct order. Good to hear. However, there were several centres where students presented work out of order and upside down. Now, that's not necessarily your fault, that wouldn't be your fault, but what I would do is check before you leave the centre. I know it's 3 hours long and you're probably desperate to get out of the centre after 3 hours. You've been sat for 3 hours doing IT exam, you're desperate to leave. But I would make sure that you spend some time and check with the centre that they have put the things in the right order and that have organised things properly for you. Because they might not do that and they're going to disadvantage you, they're going to lose you marks. So make sure you do that. In some instances, the quality of the printouts was poor and this did not allow students to access all marks. It's quite a lot of work could not be seen. Again, that isn't down to you, that's the centre who's got the printer there, but if you do find that the print quality is poor, then ask for a different printer and make sure that they do that. And if they haven't done that, if they haven't fulfilled that request, then I might consider putting in an appeal to Edexcel, or just mention that to Edexcel, because they should be providing you with a decent quality printer to print out your work. Otherwise, you're going to lose marks. If the work cannot be seen on the printout, you're going to lose marks. Where screenshots are requested, please ensure that they are not inappropriately cropped and are large enough to be read. Now, that's the second time that this report has mentioned that comment. So what does that mean? Now, just be careful with your cropping. Only crop out the stuff that you don't need, so don't go overboard with your cropping. Crop it down to a small thing so you cannot see it. Make sure it's large enough to read, so spend the time to enlarge it. I've gone through that before. Take the time to crop it appropriately and enlarge it as appropriate. Otherwise, you're going to lose out on marks there. Now, that completes this video of examiner comments. I'll link to the exam report so you can read it yourself and take of it what you will. It should be able to help you for your exam. Good luck with your exams if you're taking them. I hope they go really well. Please let me know in the comments how they go. I always like reading the comments. I always respond to the comments. I like hearing feedback about how your exam's gone. And as always, if you haven't already, please like the video if it's helped you. And please consider subscribing. It really does make a difference. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate when you subscribe to my channel. And obviously I'll be making more videos as well, so great for you to have the updates. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.